Hey everyone, ready to dive deep. Today we're tackling Cal Newport's deep work. You ever get that feeling like you're so locked into a task that the rest of the world just fades away? That's the power of deep work.
And in today's world, it's not just powerful, it's almost like a superpower, right?
Totally. And Newport illustrates this brilliantly with the story of Jason Ben,
Oh, Jason Ben, yeah.
the guy who went from spending like 98% of his workday browsing the web to becoming this coding whiz in Silicon Valley.
Right, because he completely immersed himself. No internet, no distractions, just him and code, basically.
Right.
And that's what enabled him to develop those highly specialized skills that are so valuable, especially in a place like Silicon Valley.
Exactly. It's like that saying, the more you concentrate, the more you accomplish. And speaking of accomplishing incredible things, Newport also talks about Nate Silver,
Oh, Nate Silver, great example.
a guy who accurately predicted the 2012 election using, you guessed it, deep work.
See, Silver's story really shows how this translates into a real-world advantage. I mean, he was able to analyze huge amounts of data, tons of polls, using incredibly complex tools, and it's that mastery of those systems, that ability to work deeply, that allowed him to see what others missed.
Right. It's like having this clarity of vision that others just don't. But here's what I find fascinating. If deep work is so valuable, why does it seem like our culture is actively working against it?
It's true. Think about it. Open offices, constant emails, social media, it's like we're almost wired for distraction.
Exactly. And Newport captures this perfectly with this idea of the metric black hole. We're so busy trying to look busy, answering emails, going to meetings, that we never stop to ask if any of it actually matters.
It's the appearance of productivity, not actual productivity.
Totally.
And one of the examples he gives is this guy, Tom Cochran, a CTO who discovered his company was spending, get this, over $1 million a year on email.
$1 million
What?
on email. You've got to be kidding me.
I know. It's insane. But it just shows how much these seemingly small distractions add up, chipping away at our time and focus, and ultimately preventing us from doing the work that actually moves the needle.
Right. It's like we're addicted to the illusion of productivity, confusing checking things off a to-do list with making real progress. But what about the bigger goals, the things that require real focus and deep thinking? That's where deep work comes in.
Exactly. It's about resisting the pull of those shallow tasks, those distractions, and dedicating your full attention to the things that truly matter. And the good news is, it is something you can get better at.
So how do we escape this black hole of busyness, this illusion of productivity? How do we actually get back to doing deep work?
Well, luckily, Newport provides a really clear roadmap in deep work. He lays out 4 rules, kind of like guiding principles.
Okay, let's hear them. Rule number 1.
Rule number 1, work deeply.
Sounds pretty straightforward.
It does, but it's more than just putting in the hours. It's about approaching work with this real intentionality, this focus.
So it's not just about being present physically. You have to be present mentally, too.
Exactly. And Newport actually offers a few different approaches to help you actually achieve that deep work state. He calls them philosophies of deep work scheduling.
Okay, I like where this is going. Lay it on me.
So the first one is, he calls it the monastic approach.
Monastic approach, okay.
Yeah, so think total seclusion. Like, he gives the example of Donald Knuth, this famous computer scientist who completely swore off email to focus on his work.
Wow, I can't even imagine. No email whatsoever.
Right. But that's the idea, complete separation from distractions to really dedicate yourself to the task at hand.
I admire the dedication, but I don't know if I could go full monk. What about the rest of us who aren't ready for that level of isolation? What are our options?
Right, so there's the bimodal approach, which is a bit more, let's say, balanced. It's like finding chunks of time for deep work. Maybe it's a weekend retreat, maybe it's even just a day with no meetings. And you switch back and forth between those periods of deep focus and your more typical workday.
So you're not always off the grid, but you're creating those intentional periods of deep work. Yeah, I like that. What else?
Then you've got the rhythmic approach, which is all about routine, like blocking out the same time every day for deep work. The key here is consistency. It's like making deep work a habit.
Like going to the gym or something. You build that routine, and eventually it becomes second nature. Okay, that one resonates with me. What about the last approach?
So the last one is called the journalistic philosophy, and this one's all about adaptability. So it's about seizing those moments of focus whenever they present themselves. Kind of like, a journalist who has to be ready to drop everything and write a story when the news breaks.
Okay, so you're learning to harness those little pockets of time that open up unexpectedly. So with all these different philosophies, how do you figure out which one's the right fit for you?
It really depends on your work style, your personality, what you're trying to accomplish. Do you thrive on routine, or do you need flexibility? Do you work best in total isolation, or do you need some level of social interaction? It might take some experimenting.
That makes sense. Try them out, see what sticks. All right, so rule number one, work deeply. And now we've got some different strategies for putting that into practice. What about rule number two?
Rule number 2, embrace boredom.
Embrace boredom. Wait, is that really what he said?
Yeah, you heard that right. It might sound a little counterintuitive at first, but stick with me on this.
Okay, you've got my attention. Go on.
So think about it. We're so used to constant stimulation these days, right? Phones, social media, it's never ending. Our brains have almost forgotten how to be bored.
And that's a bad thing because...
Because, and this is the interesting part, boredom can actually be this incredible catalyst for creativity, for deep thinking. It's in those moments when we're not being bombarded with information that our minds can actually wander, make new connections, and come up with those aha moments.
It's like we're so busy consuming that we've forgotten how to actually produce, how to think for ourselves.
Precisely. And this constant need for stimulation, it actually weakens our ability to focus. Think of it like a muscle. If you don't exercise it, it gets weaker.
So how do we start embracing boredom? How do we retrain our brains to focus?
Well, Newport suggests a few things. One is scheduling internet blocks.
So instead of being online all day, you're choosing specific times to be online,
Yeah.
specific times to be offline.
Exactly. It's about reclaiming control over your attention, right? Being more intentional about when you're plugged in and when you're not.
Creating those boundaries. Okay, what else?
He also talks about something he calls productive meditation. Have you ever noticed how some of your best thinking happens when you're doing something else, something mindless, like taking a walk or washing the dishes?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah,
It's like my brain finally has the space to breathe and actually make connections.
that's exactly it. Productive meditation is about taking advantage of those moments. It's about being intentional about letting your mind wander while you're engaged in those low stimuli activities. You're not just letting your mind wander aimlessly, though, right? You're giving it a problem to chew on.
Ah, so you're still directing your focus, even in that more relaxed state.
Yeah.
Interesting. Any other mental exercises we can try?
This one might sound a little unusual, but Newport suggests memory training.
Memory training, like what, memorizing a deck of cards?
Exactly. It sounds strange, I know. But it actually works. The idea is that the mental discipline required to memorize something complex, it strengthens those same cognitive muscles that you use for deep work.
Yeah, it's like you're giving your brain a workout, right?
Yeah.
Building those mental muscles. Okay, so we've talked about working deeply, we've talked about embracing boredom, but what about the elephant in the room, social media? What's Newport's take on that?
So rule number 3 is actually quit social media. But before you panic and throw your phone out the window, it's not about completely disconnecting. It's about being more intentional with how you use it.
So it's less about delete your account and more about use it with purpose.
Exactly. He uses this analogy of a craftsman selecting their tools. A craftsman doesn't just use any tool, right? They think carefully about which tools are actually going to help them produce the best work.
So we should be applying that same kind of scrutiny to the digital tools we use every day, social media included.
Absolutely. Are you using social media in a way that's truly beneficial for you, or are you just mindlessly scrolling?
It's so easy to get sucked into that vortex of comparison, right? Seeing what everyone else is doing, feeling like you're not doing enough.
And that's where that 80-20 rule comes in handy, the Pareto principle.
Right, the idea that 80% of our results come from 20% of our efforts.
Exactly. So when it comes to social media, is it part of that vital 20% that's actually driving meaningful results for you?
It really makes you think twice about how you're spending your time online. Okay, so we've got work deeply, we've got embrace boredom, we've got quit social media. What's the final rule for mastering deep work?
Rule number 4 is drain the shallows.
Drain the shallows. I like that. What does that look like in practice?
So it's about minimizing all that shallow work that tends to creep into our days, you know? The emails, the meetings, all those little tasks that make us feel busy but don't actually contribute to our larger goals.
Oh, I know those all too well. So how do we get rid of them? How do we drain the shallows, so to speak?
Well, he has a few strategies. One that might sound a little extreme is scheduling every minute of your day.
Wait, every minute, like down to the second.
I know it sounds intense, but the idea isn't to create this rigid, unbreakable schedule. It's more about bringing awareness to how you're actually spending your time.
So it's about mindful planning rather than like robotic adherence to a timetable.
Exactly. It helps you be more intentional with your day, more deliberate about what you're prioritizing.
Makes sense. What else? Any other tips for draining the shallows?
He also talks about this idea of quantifying the depth of your activities. Like, ask yourself, how long would it take to train a recent college grad to do this task?
So if the answer's not very long, it's probably a sign you're stuck in the shallow end.
Rest. Those are the tasks that you can probably delegate or eliminate altogether so you can focus on the work that actually requires your unique skills and expertise.
So it's about being protective of your time and energy, making sure you're spending them on the things that really move the needle. This has been such a thought-provoking conversation. Any final words of wisdom from Cal Newport before we wrap things up?
You know, the biggest takeaway from deep work is that it's not a destination, it's a journey. It's about consistently making the choice to focus, to do the deep work that matters. And when you do that, when you commit to that, you'll be amazed at what you can achieve.
Beautifully said. And for our listeners out there, pick one of these strategies that resonated with you today and just try it. Maybe it's scheduling those internet blocks or experimenting with productive meditation or even just asking yourself, is this task truly vital? The key is to start somewhere. Experiment, find what works for you, because when you master the art of deep work, you open up a world of possibilities. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Cal Newport.